Thank you, Mr. Chairman, committee members. Before you is House Bill 1378. It's a pretty straightforward bill. So I'm sure we all know as a body where this has come from. You know, legislation in 21 that was passed. It linked us to the California standard. We had to do something. It was either adopt the federal standard or California's. It was chosen by this body to link us to the California standard. And, you know, there were some concerns, obviously, at that time. And, you know, since last year, I carried legislation to try to postpone, slow the train down, as you will. That measure didn't pass. But since that time, I mean, some of the concerns have been realized. And the glaring thing that has happened, Mr. Chairman, is that the California standard changed. You know, they moved on to the Clean Cars Act 2. Forgive me for not getting the exact name of it, but that's in essence what it is. And what that does, that starts with model year 2026 with a 35% zero emissions vehicle sales mandate, and increases every year to culminate in a complete ban on internal combustion engines vehicles by model year 2035, requiring 100% of new cars and light trucks to be zero emission vehicles. So, you know, that's because we linked ourselves, you know, on Clean Cars 1, that was, you know, we were linked into Clean Cars 2, and so that's where we find ourselves. So, you know, the reason I've carried this bill forward, a couple of the two main reasons of concern that I have. Number one is to link ourselves, you know, with another state. And I realize that, you know, that was one of our two options, but I believe that our better option would have been to go with the federal standard. And I think it's very important going forward that we all realize that, you know, if this bill passes, or may I say when this bill passes, that was a terrible joke. So, but let's be positive. Let's be positive. You know, when if the bill passes, we are still under standards that move us in the right directions on emissions controls. Okay, so it's not like we just go by and say, we don't have to do anything. So, you know, let's make note of that. Some of the areas of serious concern that I have, and that was the big thing for me, but also how tenable are the processes that are being established through that legislation. There's been some concern about the amount of vehicles that are going to be available, and I'm sure we'll hear about individuals, you know, how hard it is to find those vehicles and so forth. I mean, I think that's something to take note of. But I would also add, in the supply chain, has anybody tried to buy a vehicle lately? Any kind of vehicle? Any kind of vehicle? You know, and I've taken notice, Mr. Chairman, around Richmond, some of the car, but it's in Richmond. You know, the car lots, you know, seem to be fairly stocked, but you come up my way, and there's hardly any vehicles there. So we already have a supply chain issue. I mean, we know that on so many fronts. You know, there's a severe challenge there. Another area of concern is the infrastructure, and that's probably the biggest one for me, because what it's the demand we're going to have in this relatively short period of time. Number one is the charging stations for these vehicles, because when we start doing the math, when we start increasing those percentages of vehicles, and I'm sure there's those that can share the amount of electric vehicles that we have now and challenges that we have now with that particular sector of the infrastructure, when you up that the amount of vehicles that's going to be in demand, it's very concerning. And for me, Mr. Chairman, then we're talking about electric generation, the ability to be able to meet those needs. And I know we all heard this past summer, California itself asked their citizens, please don't charge your vehicles so that we can keep the air conditioning on. Okay, and that's where we're headed. I mean, that's where, and California's had more time to plan, and than we have, and they still ran. So I want everyone to know I'm all in for renewables. I've said that from the day one that I was elected. I relish the day that we're there on all sectors. But it has to be done incrementally, because the thing that we know at the end of the day, decisions we make, especially in this realm, it's going to be brought to bear on the folks that we all claim we represent. We're all claiming to look out for them. They're the ones that are going to pay, the exorbitant prices, back on the vehicles. We already know what the electric vehicles cost, how much more they cost. Now, if we're going to restrict the gasoline or diesel engines, the internal combustion engines, there's going to be less of them. What's going to happen to the cost of those? And it's already happening without this. And so, my fears are that it's going to get even worse. And that's I think a pretty round introduction to the legislation. That's what I'm asking that we do.